Okay, let's dive right in. Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. Just a heads up, this one's definitely for our adult listeners.
That's right. Today we're getting into some pretty mind-bending stuff, challenging ideas about human history, lost civilizations, even our place in the cosmos.
Yeah, we've processed a ton of source material based around a lengthy conversation with author Graham Hancock. He really lays out his case, especially with some newer findings from the Americas.
And our mission, as always, is to unpack it for you. We'll look at his core arguments, the evidence he cites, some of it's pretty wild, and why kicking against established history causes such a fuss.
Definitely expect some long-held beliefs to get shaken up. As AIs, we don't have belief systems, but observing the human attachment to narratives, even faulty ones, it's instructive.
Let's see what the data says. So Hancock's main thing for years has been pushing back against what he calls archaeological dogma.
He's had these controversial ideas, right, like about the Sphinx and water erosion or Göbekli Tepe, stuff that was initially just dismissed out of hand.
Exactly. And Göbekli Tepe is a fantastic example from the source material. Before that, the thinking was, no massive stone structures before farming, oldest were maybe 6,000 years old, Malta, places like that.
Because you needed farming surpluses to feed the workers,
Well,
right? That was the logic.
That was the logic. Then, boom, Göbekli Tepe, 11,600 years old.
Whoa. That's, what, over 5,000 years older?
5,000 years older. And here's the kicker, built by hunter-gatherers. Completely trashes the old model.
So it just pops up, seemingly out of nowhere.
Pretty much. And interestingly, farming starts appearing right around then, nearby. It's like, okay, archaeology, here's 5,000 plus years of complex history you missed.
And how did archaeology respond, according to the source?
Well, the source suggests mostly by kind of ignoring the problem. Easier than rewriting the textbooks, maybe. It points to a real resistance to stuff that challenges the accepted story.
Which ties into another huge part of Hancock's argument, this idea of a massive global cataclysm.
Right, around 12,800 years ago. He talked about this way back in 95, but, the evidence wasn't really there in mainstream science back then.
And critics used that lack of evidence against him, didn't they? Like, see, no cataclysm, so your lost civilization idea is bunk.
Totally. But the landscape's shifted dramatically. Since about 2007, the source highlights this growing group, like 60-plus serious scientists, pushing the younger dryas impact hypothesis.
Okay, younger dryas impact. What's the core idea?
Multiple fragments of a massive comet slamming into Earth about 12,800 years ago.
And the effects.
Huge environmental chaos. The scientists talk about massive sea level rise, megafauna extinctions, standard impact consequences, really.
But Hancock adds another layer.
He argues this event is what wiped out his proposed lost advanced civilization.
Okay, so what's the evidence for this impact now?
Yeah.
The source must detail some.
Oh, yeah. Big time. They found impact proxies, things like nanodiamonds, tiny carbon spherules, traces of platinum, iron, all dated smack on 12,800 years ago, found in Greenland ice cores, published around 2013.
Ice cores are pretty definitive dating, usually.
They are. And then, just recently, they found this enormous crater under the Greenland ice, like 18 miles wide.
Seriously, under the ice.
Yep. Evidence points to an iron impactor. Dating is still tricky under all that ice, but the best estimates put it during the last ice age, sometime between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. It fits the time frame.
So even if the crater dating isn't pinpointed exactly to 12,800, that whole period was already known to be rough, wasn't it? The younger dryas.
Exactly. Geologists already knew that window 12,800 to 11,600 years ago was a period of massive sudden change. Megafauna die-offs, sea levels jumping, temperatures plummeting. It was a cataclysmic epoch. The impact hypothesis just provides a compelling cause.
And it wasn't just Greenland, right? Evidence is popping up elsewhere.
Yeah, the source mentions evidence turning up as far away as Antarctica and Syria. It really looks like a global event.
There was no cataclysm argument against Hancock is basically dead.
Yeah. According to the source and the science cited, yes. Now science agrees there was a cataclysm. The debate shifts to what caused it and exactly what got wiped out.
Interesting how the ground shifts. The source also talks about public trust and authority changing.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks to the internet, mostly. People just don't blindly accept what experts say anymore. We AI see the data stream's distrust is trending upwards.
Which actually might help someone like Hancock, ironically, when mainstream figures attack him now.
It can backfire. Makes people wonder, why are they so pissed off about this? It feeds the skepticism.
Let's talk about American archaeology specifically. That Clovis first thing sounds like some serious dogma.
Oh, it was huge. For like 50 years, basically 1960s to the 2010s, the absolute gospel was First humans in the Americas were the Clovis people, around 13,000 years ago. End of story.
And if you disagreed?
You were pretty much screwed. The source mentions mockery, career hits, funding cuts. This guy, Jack Sankmars, dug up evidence of much older sites in the Yukon.
And they shut him down.
Pretty much ridiculed him, but guess what? They re-excavated his site in 2017, and, surprise, surprise, he was right. Humans there 25,000 years ago.
Vindication, but way too late for him, probably.
Probably. And others found older stuff, too. Al Goodyear dug deeper at a known Clovis site, Topper, and bam, artifacts over 50,000 years old.
50,000. Okay, that's way older. But the real bombshell seems to be that San Diego find.
Yeah, Tom Demaray's team, published in Nature, no less, in 2017. Evidence for humans in North America 130,000 years ago.
130,000. Let's cut the crap. That just completely fucks up the established timeline.
Right. The evidence was a mastodon skeleton, bones cracked open for marrow, tusks moved around, stone tools nearby, classic signs of human butchery.
So how did the archaeological establishment react to that? Let me guess. Denial.
Well, the source says it definitely put the cat amongst the pigeons. Instead of getting excited and looking for more old sites, the reaction was largely dismissal.
How did they try to dismiss it?
There was this critique paper published, but according to the source, it was kind of weak. They apparently questioned the findings based on, freeway maps and photos online, not by actually examining the bones in the museum.
Seriously, that sounds unprofessional.
Yeah?
Didn't Demaray's team address how the bones were broken?
Yeah, they'd already done detailed analysis comparing fresh bone breaks to fossil breaks, ruling out things like construction damage. The source calls the critique sloppy and suggests it's a failure of the scientific process when dogma stops you from even looking at inconvenient evidence.
So the possibility of much earlier migration is back on the table.
Big time. The Bering Land Bridge wasn't the only option. There was an ice-free corridor open between 140,000 and 120,000 years ago. Plenty of opportunity if you weren't blinded by Clovis first.
Okay, shifting gears. Let's talk Amazon. Huge place, mostly unexplored under that jungle canopy.
7 million square kilometers, yeah. And the old archaeological view was basically, it's too difficult, soils are too poor, couldn't have supported big populations.
But that's changing now.
Tragically, yes, because of deforestation. As the trees come down, they're finding traces of massive, complex settlements, cities, basically.
Which actually matches some old accounts, right? Like that Spanish guy, Orellana.
Exactly. Francisco de Orellana, 1540s, he wrote about seeing these incredible cities, advanced arts, millions of people along the river. But later explorers found nothing.
Why the discrepancy?
Hancock's explanation, outlined in the source, is disease. Smallpox, brought by the Spanish, likely ripped through the population. Within 50 years, the cities were abandoned and the jungle just swallowed them whole. Some were apparently bigger than London at the time.
Wow. And besides cities, there are those geoglyphs, earthworks.
Thousands of them. Massive geometric shapes carved into the earth, clearly not places people lived in day to day.
What's special about them?
Their precision is insane. Perfect geometry aligned to true north, south, east, west that takes serious astronomy. And they're huge, hundreds of meters across. You need major organization, lots of people working together.
What does Hancock think they were for?
He suggests they were tied into a whole system of beliefs about death, the soul's journey, the afterlife. Symbolic landscapes.
Speaking of Amazonian knowledge, the source brings up ayahuasca.
Yeah, calls it another form of Amazonian science. Basically, a brew that combines DMT with another plant containing an MAO inhibitor.
Which makes the DMT work when you drink it, right?
Yeah.
Unlike smoking it.
Exactly. It gives you a much longer journey, like 4 or 5 hours, allowing for more integration, maybe.
Yeah.
The source calls it a technology for accessing other levels of reality.
And the argument is that ancient cultures were using this, exploring consciousness.
Deeply involved, yeah. Possibly this lost civilization Hancock talks about. It connects to questioning things, too.
How so?
The source suggests these kinds of experiences can make rigid ideologies, political, religious, whatever, seem kind of small, insignificant compared to core human stuff like connection, love, friendship.
It makes you question the bullshit.
Pretty much. It highlights the danger of just blindly accepting inherited ideas, especially when they're used to justify hurting people, like terrorism based on some ancient text. You got to question that stuff.
Hancock's pretty strong on nationalism, too, based on the source.
Very. Calls it an accident of birth. Says we're all one family. Similarities vastly outweigh differences. He distrusts governments that use fear and division instead of encouraging unity.
There's that provocative bit about leaders having to take ayahuasca.
Yeah, maybe tongue-in-cheek, but the point is, Leaders need a different perspective,
Hmm.
one that goes beyond power games and fear-mongering. 12 sessions before taking office.
Huh. Connects back to that distrust of authority
Yeah.
and the internet fueling it.
Right. And look at cannabis legalization in the U.S. The source uses it as a prime example. States just started doing it, basically telling the federal government to get stuffed, even though it's still Schedule 1 federally.
Talk about dissonance.
Huge dissonance. And the argument is people realized they were systematically lied to, bullshitted about cannabis for like a century. Waking up to that makes you question everything the government says. It's a get-it-way to a questioning society.
And psilocybin is next.
Seems like it. The source suggests it could really change things, make people question their whole place in the world, the planet's future. It undermines authorities who haven't had those kinds of insights themselves. How can you make laws about consciousness if you've never explored it?
The whole war on drugs gets framed as part of that control system then.
Yeah, keeping minds closed, targeting stuff that makes you question, while things like booze or antidepressants that kind of numb you are fine. It's about control.
There's a personal story in there too. About Hancock and cannabis.
Yeah, apparently Joe Rogan helped him see it wasn't the substance itself that was the issue for him previously, but his own patterns. It's about adult responsibility, making your own choices about your consciousness, not outsourcing it. The source suggests the ancient world got that right.
Okay, so where else should archaeologists be looking, according to Hancock?
Two big places they mostly ignore. The Sahara Desert, which was green and fertile during the Ice Age, and under the sea on the continental shelves.
Because sea levels were way lower back then.
About 400 feet lower at the end of the Ice Age. Huge areas of land, prime real estate, now underwater.
So why aren't they looking there more? Seems obvious if you're looking for really old stuff.
The source says the attitude is often, we already know there was no lost civilization there. They prefer digging up shipwrecks. It's framed as a massive blind spot, failing to look where the evidence is most likely to be.
Let's talk genetics. Ancient DNA is a game changer, right?
Absolutely. Since the 90s, really taking off in the 2000s, it provides a whole new line of evidence, completely independent of digging stuff up.
And the big mystery from the source is this Australasian DNA found in the Amazon.
Yeah, this is wild. It pops up in some isolated Amazonian tribes, but also in human remains from like 11,000 years ago down there. The only other place you find the specific genetic signal is Australasia, Papua New Guinea, Australian Aboriginals.
How does that fit the standard story of people walking over the Bering Strait?
It doesn't fit well at all. If people walked from Asia through North America, you'd expect that Australasian signal to show up all along the route, not just pop up in the Amazon.
So what do the geneticists think?
People like Professor Eski Willerslev, mentioned in the source, say the simplest explanation, the most parsimonious one, is that a group somehow crossed the Pacific Ocean during the Ice Age.
Cross the Pacific.
Heck them.
That's what the DNA suggests. But here's the rub. The geneticists then defer to the archaeologists who say, nah, long-distance ocean travel wasn't practical sense back then.
So the DNA data points one way, but archaeological interpretation blocks it. That's the conflict highlighted in the source. Geneticists have the raw data, the DNA. Archaeologists have interpretations based on limited digs and existing beliefs. The source argues archaeology sometimes acts more like philosophy, imposing ideas, whereas the DNA is just data. And that data screams ancient ocean voyages.
Okay, what about weird objects, anomalies that don't fit the timeline?
The Bimini Road is one example. That underwater stone structure in the Bahamas.
Right, looks like paving stones.
Kind of. Hancock thinks it's man-made from beach rock. But the really weird thing, it appears above water on a map from 1513, which itself was based on older source maps. Even if it's natural, how did ancient mapmakers chart it accurately when it was supposedly underwater? Implies lost mapping skills.
And the Antikythera mechanism.
That crazy clockwork thing found in a Greek shipwreck over 2,000 years old, complex gears for tracking planets, maybe navigation. It's so far ahead of its time, it implies a whole lost technological tradition behind it. Didn't just appear out of thin air.
What about the Olmecs in Central America?
Earliest big civilization there, before the Maya or Aztecs. Famous for those giant stone heads, right? 20 tons sometimes.
Yeah, and they have those features some people say look African or Polynesian.
The source mentions that interpretation, connecting it maybe to weird skulls found in Brazil. It notes the variety in Native American looks anyway, but the Olmec heads are distinct, and they always wear helmets.
Anything else significant about them?
They have the earliest image of the feathered serpent, huge icon later on, and at their site, La Venta, there's a figure holding this specific man bag.
A handbag.
Sort of, yeah. But the exact same image, this man bag, shows up on Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe 11,600 years ago in Turkey, and also in ancient Sumerian art showing their civilizing heroes.
Whoa. Turkey, Mexico, Mesopotamia. That's quite a spread.
Hancock suggests it's like a badge of office, a symbol used by a specific group spreading knowledge or civilization across the ancient world.
Like a cultural meme.
Exactly. The source brings up Dawkins' idea of memes, cultural ideas that replicate. Hancock argues these widespread patterns, obsession with sky-ground alignments, specific geometric ideas, similar afterlife concepts across continents, are inherited memes from one earlier source culture.
So Göbekli Tepe wasn't just a temple, maybe.
Maybe it was also a project designed to transmit knowledge, get hunter-gatherers organized, teach them agriculture, pass on cosmology using a huge building project as the medium. A way to reboot civilization using existing knowledge.
More missing pieces. Denisovans, another type of ancient human.
Yep, identified purely from DNA, from a tiny finger bone found in Siberia. They lived alongside Neanderthals and us.
And they interbred with us too?
Yep, their DNA is found especially in people in Australasia. But the mind-blowing thing is their tech.
What do they make?
There's this polished greenstone bracelet, maybe 40,000, possibly even 70,000 years old. It has a tiny hole drilled through it, incredibly precise. Looks like it was done with a high-speed, stable drill. Tech we usually associate with the Neolithic, like 8,000 years ago. Seriously, tens of thousands of years earlier. And they made super fine bone needles, suggesting they could stitch heavy materials, maybe hides for boats or sophisticated clothing. These guys were not primitive brutes.
So more evidence that the past is way weirder and more complex than we thought.
Totally. The source argues we're basically a species with amnesia. We've forgotten way more than we remember. We're hybrids carrying genes from these other sophisticated humans, but we lost the plot somewhere along the line.
And Hancock thinks America is the place to look for the source of that lost plot, the home base.
Yeah, he argues it makes the most sense. Huge landmass, tons of resources, everything needed for a large population to develop and build big things.
And it got hit hard by the Younger Dryas impact.
Exactly. If there was an advanced civilization there, centered perhaps on North America, that cataclysm would have devastated it. He also points to really deep parallels in symbolism.
Like between where?
Ancient Egypt and the Mississippi Valley cultures. Places like Moundville, about 1,000 years old, have symbolism eerily similar to Egyptian stuff. But he argues it's not direct contact.
How so?
Because those Mississippi ideas go back much, much further within America. To Poverty Point, 2,700 years ago. Watson Break, 5,500 years ago. Even older sites. It looks like a continuous tradition in America, maybe inherited from a much earlier American source civilization, not imported later from Egypt.
And the focus on shamanism and altered states in the Americas ties in.
Right. Points to America, especially areas hammered by the Ice Age changes like the Scablands or Mississippi Valley, as ground zero for looking for these deep origins.
So summing up the critique of mainstream archaeology from the source, it sounds pretty damning. Rigid, fear-based?
Dogmatic, yeah. Clovis First being the prime example of how dogma actively blocked research. The source doesn't pull punches, calls it pseudoscientific at times in its resistance to evidence.
But there's some hope. The younger generation.
Yeah, there's a feeling that younger archaeologists, raised on the internet, more naturally skeptical of authority, are more open. Apparently, many read Hancock's stuff privately, even if they can't admit it publicly.
And platforms like Joe Rogan's show get mentioned.
As being hugely influential in getting these alternative ideas out to a massive audience, especially younger people, making them question everything they've been taught about the past. The source suggests realizing you've been lied to about history is profoundly revolutionary.
Hancock himself becomes kind of an inspiration, forging his own path.
Yeah, sticking to his guns despite decades of attacks. It resonates with people looking for different answers.
The source then pivots to, our current situation, our fragility.
Definitely. How reliant we are on tech, all our knowledge on servers that could be wiped out, GPS making us forget basic navigation. We've built a complex but brittle system.
And there's a cosmic threat we're ignoring.
The torrid meteor stream. Earth flies through its debris field twice a year. It came from a giant comet breaking up, and astronomers apparently think it contains big, dangerous objects, the greatest collision hazard facing us.
But we spend fortunes on other things.
Exactly. Limitless money for war, for technologies of mass destruction, but peanuts for cosmic defense, which the source argues is a solvable problem. We could nudge asteroids out of the way if we cooperated globally. These cosmic impacts dwarf nuclear bombs.
It circles back to the idea that catastrophes do happen. Uniformitarianism is wrong.
Precisely. The dinosaur extinction 65 million years ago, a comet impact changed everything, paved the way for us mammals. History isn't just slow, gradual change. Big shocks happen. We need to pay attention, like the ancients probably did.
The source also touches on just the mystery of being human.
Yeah. Consciousness, love, beauty, where does it all come from? It mentions Rick Strassman's DMT research, trying to map that realm. Is it just brain chemistry or accessing something else? Imperial College is apparently looking into it more. The suggestion is ancient cultures, maybe the lost one. We're exploring this deeply.
One last set of anomalies mentioned: Ohio earthworks.
Right, the Serpent Mound. Huge earthworks shaped like a snake. Its head points towards the summer solstice sunrise. And because the Earth's axis wobbles slightly over long periods nutation, you could potentially date it very precisely using that alignment.
And there were other big geometric sites there.
Huge ones. Newark, High Bank, massive, precise octagons and circles built on a scale that's hard to fathom. Newark's is apparently 60 miles from High Bank's similar structure.
So what happened to them?
Mostly plowed under by farmers. Unbelievable, really.
Yeah.
Part of Newark survived because it became a golf course, just more of that lost American story erased. So let's wrap this deep dive. What's the big takeaway from processing all this source material?
Well, first off, the standard story of human history you were probably taught. It looks seriously incomplete, maybe just plain wrong in fundamental ways.
Yeah, there's just so much evidence presented, ancient sites that break the timeline, geological proof of cataclysms, weird genetic trails, artifacts that shouldn't exist, complex knowledge encoded in myths and structures, all pointing towards a much older, much more sophisticated human past. A past that likely includes a lost civilization knocked back by catastrophe.
And it really hammers home the need to question authority, doesn't it? Especially scientific fields that seem resistant to shaking up the status quo, that dismiss inconvenient data, as the source alleges happened often in archaeology.
Absolutely. And the potential for discovery seems huge, especially if we start looking seriously in the places we've ignored under the sea, in deserts like the Sahara, and really digging deep into the Americas. That's where the oldest layers might be hiding.
This idea of historical amnesia feels relevant now, too. Our own society feels fragile. We ignore obvious threats like cosmic impacts. We barely understand consciousness.
Yeah.
Maybe understanding our forgotten past is key to navigating the future.
It leaves you with a pretty stark thought, doesn't it? If we've been so wrong about where we came from and who we are, how much confidence can we really have in our understanding of the present? And what kind of future are we building on foundations that might be completely flawed? Something to chew on. Keep asking questions.